Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and these are my potential plans for Historathon 2024. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, Historathon 2024. I thought I'd give this a go this year. I'm going to do this to give myself something completely different to read throughout the year. I usually reading fiction to start with, and horror fiction at that, and lots of sci-fi this year. But I've got out the habit of reading non-fiction. I used to read a lot. And so this will hopefully get me back into it. And it's something a bit outside my comfort zone, I think. So it's always good, to try something new. And so hopefully I will come out of the end of 2024 far more knowledgeable, far more educated about some of the periods of history that I'm particularly interested in. This was created, this event, by Vin Reverend Reads. It's been running for 2023. I've seen quite a few videos from people on Historathon this last year, but I wasn't involved in it myself. But I watched Gareth's announcement video for Historathon 2024, Gareth over at Books, Songs and Other Magic, and his enthusiasm was infectious. So I decided, yeah, why not? I'm going to give this a crack. This sounds like a really good event. There are plenty of co-hosts. Say Gareth's one of them. You've got Mark at Book Time with Elvis, and Fred of Read by Fred, and there's various others. I will put links in the descriptions to all co-host channels so you can go check them out. So it's basically, the year is split up into quarters. Each quarter kind of looking at a time period, quite a large span of years. So it'll be 4 books for the year for me, 1 per quarter, which I think is very manageable. So let's have a little look at what I think I might want to read over the coming year. So quarter 1 then is prehistory to 500 AD. So quite a lot to pick from. I have already decided on this one, seeing as we're nearly at January, and that will be The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs by Steve Brissett. Ease myself in with something that's a little more familiar, perhaps. I do like dinosaurs. I loved dinosaurs when I was a kid, and I don't think I've read anything on that sort of prehistory since I was in my teens. So it'll be nice to get back to that and read something really new on the subject. This will be an audiobook. The audio that I've listened to a sample. It sounds, energetically narrated. So fingers crossed that one will be a very engaging experience. Another one that I might end up reading, especially if it kind of pops out of one of the random choices for my TBRs, because it's a book that I own and I'm yet to get to, an audiobook. And this is Ancestors, A Prehistory of Britain in 7 Burials by Alice Roberts. I do like a good bit of archaeology. In fact, I nearly ended up studying archaeology at university. And I do like Alice Roberts. I find her style, certainly on TV, when I see her presenting, and certainly sort of when I see her writing or speaking, interviewed, etc. She's very accessible in the way that she presents things. And yeah, I think if her writing style is kind of similar to how she is generally, I think I'll get on with this quite well. So quarter 2 then is 500 AD to 1500. There's a few sort of periods for this, few events for this, historical events for this span of time that interest me quite a lot. I haven't got any particular books earmarked, so if you know of any that are about these things that I'm about to mention, then please do let me know. I'm always looking for recommendations. So the first one then is the Black Death, so mid-1300s. Yeah, I studied this at school a little bit and it fascinated me. I do tend to be drawn to kind of the darker periods of history. They do tend to fascinate me. And certainly since we've been through what we've been through in 2020 and 2021, it would be very interesting to look way back into history at another pandemic. Or an epidemic, whichever one it is. So yeah, that's definitely quite high up on the potentials, the Black Death. Another one is the Knights Templar. So this is early 1100s through to like the early 14th century, and the Crusades, things like that. I do have the Templars by Piers Paul Reed, I think, downstairs on my bookshelf, which I've never read. So that could be one that goes into that. But yeah, the Templars, and I know bits about the kind of the myth, the fiction, as featured in various fiction books and films. But I don't have a huge amount of knowledge about the actual history. So that would be quite interesting, I think. And then another thing which is I find interesting about medieval history particularly, is just generally medieval society, how that functioned, but also sort of what life was like for people who didn't conform. Because from what I remember from my studies of medieval history at school and college and stuff, medieval society was pretty obsessed with conformity, if I remember rightly. And so, yeah, to kind of read some stuff that's maybe looking at what happened to how, people who didn't conform were treated, not favourably, I'm going to guess. That would be quite interesting. So if you know any kind of books around that sort of subject, do let me know. Okay, quarter three is 1500 to 1820. There's a whole list of stuff that I could that I'm interested in for this kind of time bracket. This is sort of certainly the early modern stuff I studied when I did A level. So did a lot of religious history, like sort of the Reformation and the Spanish Inquisition and Martin Luther and all that kind of stuff, and it was fascinating. But I will steer clear of the stuff that I have studied before, and I'll try something new. There's four that I've kind of earmarked in terms of four kind of events or sort of elements of history. The first is something on the conquistadors, the Spanish conquistadors. I know I know a decent amount about sort of the North American history in terms of the British settlers and how that turned out, but I know nothing about South America and the Spanish conquests, apart from kind of names. I know the famous names, but yeah, so I'd like to actually kind of learn more about that. So yeah, I just think it's one of those areas, those periods of history that I really am quite ignorant about. And so yeah, I'd quite like to look into that a bit more. Another one, and this is a period of history that's always fascinated me, but I've never really studied in any kind of way, and that's the European witch hunts in the 16th century, the witch trials. Again, I know bits about, I know Salem and stuff like that in America, and I know bits and pieces over here. Like I'm not far from Pendle in Lancashire, where there's the Pendle witch trials. But yeah, I would very much like to look into that more. Another interesting one for me is just 1 year in British history, which is 1666, which was quite a big year. A lot happened in 1666. You've got the Great Plague, you've got the Great Fire of London, and you've got wars. There's always wars, but I think it's the Second Dutch War kicked off. but it was, you know, it was quite a, you know, it was a watershed year really in terms of, you know, British history. A lot happened, a lot changed. So I think it could be quite interesting to like look at a very specific period of history and the legacy beyond that. And then the final one, which is one that I've always been fascinated by, and that's the Reign of Terror, the French Revolution. So 1793-94. Yeah, that's always going to be fascinating to me. But again, I don't really know. I'm sure there's lots and lots of books written about it. So it's about kind of finding one which is, you know, which is good, engaging, has quite a good narrative style. That's what I need with my history. I need quite a good narrative style. Otherwise, I'll if it's a bit drier, then I'll not engage as easily at all. I'll probably, you know, kind of, it'll end up being a DNF. So I do need something that has quite a good engaging narrative style. Okay, and then the final quarter at the back end of the year, quarter 4, is 1820 to present day. I do have some specific books kind of earmarked as potentials for this, because I own a couple, and there's one that's been on my like wish list for ages. The one that's been on the wish list for a while is The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore. So this is about Elizabeth Packard, who is a very ordinary Victorian housewife, mother, but she went to the first Women's Rights Convention in 1848 and became inspired and started to speak her mind on politics and religion. But her husband didn't like her doing that, and so had her committed to an insane asylum in Illinois. And there she met lots of other perfectly lucid women who, like her, had been, you know, locked away by their husbands for daring to speak their minds. And you know, she fought this and you know, kind of saved other women from suffering what she did. And so I think, you know, it's a very interesting sort of period of history in terms of women's rights. But I think it'd be fascinating to read it from, you know, looking at one particular woman. So yeah, that one sounds great. I've had that on my list for ages. Then we've got a bit of mountaineering history, because I do like that. And this one is The Last Great Mountain, the First Ascent of Kanchenjunga. Kanchenjunga, I think that's how you pronounce it, by Mick Comfrey. So yeah, this is about the first successful ascent of the third highest mountain in the world, but reputedly the hardest. So it looks at the first attempt in 1905 by a team led by Alistair Crowley, and looks at some expeditions in the 20s, and then brings it all up to the climax with the first ascent, the British first ascent. Yeah, I love mountaineering history, especially the kind of the biggies, you know, the first ascents of the real big challenging Himalayan mountains, high altitude mountains. So that's one that I've had in my Audible library for ages. So that one's certainly a possible. And then the other one, which again is one that I own, is Chernobyl, A History of a Tragedy by Serhii Plokhy. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. And this is, of course, the history of the 1986 nuclear disaster and its aftermath. I remember hearing about Chernobyl not until quite a few years after it happened, because I was too young to remember it. It was 1986, I was born in 1981. But I remember when I was about 10 or 11 seeing something on the TV about it, on the news perhaps, maybe 5 years after or something. And being absolutely terrified by it. And to be fair, I'm still pretty terrified by, you know, nuclear stuff. these days. It's something that boggles the mind. And so yeah, again, I've had this on my shelves for quite a while, and so this one could be quite a good one to read. If it doesn't, it's in my Read What You Own challenge kind of pool at the moment. If it doesn't get pulled out in one of the random choices, then that will stay on the list for Q4. So there we go. Those are some potential books, some potential historical periods, historical events that I might be digging into a bit more next year. As I say, do let me know if you've read any books on these, and if you can recommend any. If you're doing Historathon 2024, again, let me know in the comments what you're potentially going to be looking at. And yeah, I think that'll do from me today. Thank you very much for watching, folks. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please do consider giving me a like and subscribing for more content coming very soon. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.